welcome to State of Play today. We are talking about something pretty interesting. It's been brewing over the last few weeks, and then a minority joined it. Last week we had the conversation around that, but something happened yesterday that had brought it back. The James Quayson wahala, the real reason his NDC colleagues ran away from their boycott of Parliament. And you see, there's a certain gentleman with me in the studio. He's the one who has been going to court on a daily basis. He's become the Quayson correspondent. Literally. You know, for a long time I was a court correspondent. The only time I think I went on a daily basis to cover anything, that wasn't a court sitting. It wasn't a court hearing. It was the MV Benjamin cocaine case. Yeah. It was the Georgina Wood that was, but that was a committee. It was a committee that was set up for her to look at. So they were sitting on a daily basis. And I used to go every morning, and then you stay there. You know, then you become. That's all you do every day. But for a court sitting that is a daily basis, a high-profile one like this, it's very unique as far as this is concerned. But it's so controversial. It's gone beyond Quayson. It's gone to a synod by-election. Now it's affecting parliamentary business. But before yesterday, the minority had told us when they took the decision to boycott Parliament each time he's in court, that there was no way they were going to backtrack on that decision. In fact, I remember talking to the minority leader this last week on PM Express, and I kept making the point to him that this is not sustainable. And he kept insisting to me, it's something that they will do. They will actually escalate it, right? Only for us to wake up yesterday, I mean, close to the end of the day, to realize that he has announced a withdrawal of that decision. That's a massive U-turn, a massive backtracking. My point is, it had always been one that was not sustainable. The MPP side had spinned it quite nicely to say, they had a lot of questions on the floor on behalf of their constituents. Ministers were on the floor of Parliament to answer the questions for them on behalf of their constituents, and they were in there. That will be play out negatively in your constituency, right? So they made a decision to side with a colleague of theirs against their constituents. Because if you're not in the House, why are you not in the House? You're either not in the House because you are serving the interests of your constituency, you're in the constituency doing some work or whatever it is, or on a committee, or in their case, they are in court. So their choice is solidarity with our colleague over representation of our people. And that's not a case any MP can win. Yeah. And I think they came to the realization and said, look, this is the thing, Charlie.
Yeah. I think even from the onset, they softened their stance. If you recall, at the initial stages, they added Collins Dawda and the minority leader himself.
True.
They said that if those two were going to court, anytime they go, they are going to join them in court and boycott parliamentary proceedings. Yeah. In fact, last week, Thursday, Dr. Forson was in court, and there was no MP accompanying him, just Felix Kwatiofosu and his lawyers who made it present to court. So, I mean, clearly, the same thing with the Dawda case. They didn't boycott parliamentary proceedings for that one. That was actually in the afternoon as well. And so, clearly, from the onset, they realized that maybe they may not be able to implement. I mean, my reading of the situation is that it was a game they were playing, but they miscalculated how they were going to achieve what they wanted to achieve. And it all started from when James Quayson wins the Asin North seat, that you have the Domahini speak publicly and say that, look, the charges should be dropped against James Quayson. I mean, that was what set this whole process in motion. Then the conversation started around it. Then before we realized, the minority took this particular position that even from the onset, everyone felt like, look, this was not sustainable at all. The question that one cannot help but ask is, what was the end game? I personally do not think the end game was to have Judge Quayson's trial terminated.
That's what the end game was. That is a stated end game.
Yeah, that's a stated end game. Yes. But I'm trying to go behind.
Now you're looking at what is the realistic end game.
Exactly. Because
so the stated end game could be different from the realistic end game.
Exactly. Because realistically, it would be strange if they were actually expecting the Attorney General to enter a nolle prosequi against James Quayson. And this is why I say so. The story would be different if the MPPs Charles Opoku had won their Asin North seat. Because, mind you, the issues against James Quayson started from even before they swore him in. Because Parliament was closely tied. And even at that time, it wasn't even clear whether the MPP was going to get the support of the independent candidate before they eventually got it, going into the speaker election. So it was about the parliamentary seats. That was what the fight against James Quayson was always about. So I would have thought that this call would have been sound and government may have been open to accepting it. In the event you have the MPPs Charles Opoku win their Senate seat. Now, once that did not happen, it clearly meant that government still had a very big bone to pick with James Quayson, because this is someone who had defied the odds. In the face of prosecution, he had gone there about being tried on a daily basis, he had managed to still make some time to campaign, had won the seat. So clearly this is not someone they owe any favor. They do not owe any favor. If he had lost, you can say that, okay, let's have mercy on him. So in the starting place, I think the NDC had the upper hand of sorts because now they had the seat. So the only other hand the government has is to prosecute him.
But here's the thing, they were convinced that if you could disrupt government business through parliament, it will become too costly for government to continue with the trial.
It depends on the government business at stake.
Yeah, but it's true. But you have the media budget coming around. You have essential government business that goes to the house, a loan that may be approved, etc. That will be affected. So their thinking was, you frustrate government business as long as you can. You introduce this gridlock in governance. Nothing gets done. No loans will be approved because already the majority themselves are unable to bring all their members to the house to do business anyway.
But in the last 2 weeks, has there been any serious business?
No. Well, when you say serious business in quotes, that's true.
Because we know
business that would.
I agree. That you see the majority equip their members in line. So the question that you ask yourself again is, when that decision was taken, what were the permutations in terms of
and that again is where I'm coming to the strategic thinking behind the minority decision. And I think there wasn't enough strategic thinking behind it. And that's why many people thought it was not realistic. Because the biggest business that this would have affected would have been the media budget review.
Yes.
And here they are calling off the boycott a week before the media budget is read. It comes back to your point. If your intention was to frustrate government business and use that as a bargaining tool to force them to let James Quayson go, then you hit them where it hurts.
Yeah.
Right? So far, it will hurt more if you frustrate. Okay, remember, this media budget review is the budget review, in fact, the government budget that will reflect the IMF program.
In fact, to realign
exactly everything else, because the budget of what was read last year for this year, the main budget of 2023. It's completely irrelevant now. Completely irrelevant. Because now they post that budget, we've had an IMF program. And all those items we've agreed to with the IMF need to be realigned. It has to go to Parliament and have Parliament now approve it, all those programs, with all the tax handles that will have to be realigned and possibly introduce new ones, we don't know. So this is a very important budget for the government. Extremely important. If this budget is affected, it will actually affect our IMF review this year.
Yeah.
I think September or November, right?
Yeah.
If you frustrate this budget to the point where it introduces the same e-levy controversy and the uncertainty, remember that?
Yes, I remember.
Which really triggered all this economic IMF conversation because, revenue, the international market reacted to us. If you frustrate it to that point, you really possibly most likely will have government paying attention. Somebody will now start pushing for, look, let's sit and talk. What can we give? And governments do that all the time, right? They will have to offer something to get something out of the deal. And then somehow you call it off then. So it begs the question, what was the strategic thinking behind this? The second thing for me is, another point that you touched on, I think they were overexcited by the Ascent North victory.
Maybe because they didn't expect to actually win.
Yeah, exactly. And we all know the conversation that happened among the NDC ranks. There were a lot of people in the executives who actually thought this was going to be an uphill task, right? So you won it. There was euphoria. We've won. We had momentum. Ghanaians had pronounced a verdict that, in essence, the prosecution of the James Quayson they were opposed to, right? That's how they interpreted Ascent North.
Yeah.
That at least now we have 17,000 people, a strong number, saying we actually prefer the guy you are claiming is going to go to jail because we disagree with your prosecution of him. NDC took that to mean, look, we have the people on our side after the elections. So let's now go out there and use that momentum and use the credit we have from the elections. All that, let's pour it into frustrating the government, and then we'll have the people backing us all the way, right? And then they went. But then they forgot that in politics, a day is a long time.
Yeah.
Once you start a process, things can change very, very quickly in terms of the people's ability to stay with you throughout. And I think they started losing the public argument as far as not going to parliament is concerned.
Yeah.
Because that pitched them against the people.
Yeah.
Not necessarily against the government. You wanted to hurt government,
yeah,
but in effect, you were hurting your people.
Yeah.
Especially because during the during the period, they had so many urgent questions that they had found on behalf of their people. Yes. Right? So you go from Asen North, you thought the people were on your side, you had the momentum, so let's use all that political advantage and use that in forcing government. But in doing so, you then pitch yourself against the same people, right? Get pitched against the same people. You pitch yourself not only against the people, well, as far as Quayson, his people may like him, but for all the MPs who had urgent questions about roads, about education, about hospital, etc. in their constituencies, that could not ask. And the MPP guys are on the floor saying, you have abandoned your people. And I remember on Top Story talking to the majority deputy whip, who was constantly making that point. If you are in one of the constituencies in question, and your MP's question about your road that is terrible has not been asked because he's rather in court instead of...
On the flip side, though, the challenge that also presented additionally was the fact that they were actually not going to the court.
That was another one, indeed.
Yes. So what I...
And you've been there, but you've been counted. I think the first day they were close.
They were just about 25.
But the first day they were more, right?
Yeah, but not beyond 50. Okay. Because what I did over the period is to try and check the capacity of the court. That court cannot take more than 120 people.
So in the court?
In the courtroom.
But what about...
No one is outside. The ones who come, they come in. And so far, my count, they never went beyond 50.
In the room?
Yes, in the room, in the courtroom. And none of them, in fact, whenever the MPs come, they come in and people who are already in, some give up their seats for the MPs to take their seats. There was a situation on one of the days where a journalist was sitting down and an attempt was made for the journalist to stand up for a member of parliament to sit down. And the gentleman refused to sit down. So I was very curious about that. So after proceedings, I asked him why he had refused to stand up. And his answer was that he's here to do his work. The MP is supposed to be in parliament to do his work. He has decided not to do his work, but come and support his colleague who is being prosecuted. He said that cannot stop him from doing his work.
In a way, if you are supporting somebody and you're solidarizing, you must sacrifice. So stand.
Exactly. Except that the courtroom, they don't allow you to stand.
Exactly. So go outside.
You don't get a seat, you stand outside. So now the media is hammering the fact that 137 MPs are not in the court. So it begs the question again, is it really to make a certain point? Because you're not going to parliament, which we don't agree with you on, because it is hurting us. Yeah. You are the ones who have actually asked questions. You are not even there to ask the questions anyways. Then also the court that you are supposed to go to, you are also not going there. So now it creates a very difficult situation. And that's how come someone like the minority leader had to try and explain that, okay, on this particular day, there were not many because it was a Monday, they were coming from their constituencies.
Yeah.
But we both know that eventually that explanation was not going to be sustainable because there were going to be weekdays like yesterday. The man was supposed to be at the Court of Appeal, was supposed to be at the High Court as well. And at the Court of Appeal, there was not a single member of parliament there.
Yesterday,
yes. No member of parliament was at the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal was just Abraham Amaliba and Baba Jamal who came over as lawyers who were part of the legal team.
So where were they?
Then Chachu Chikata there. When we went to the High Court, then the minority and a couple of others came over to join. Just about 10 of them. So it asked the question again, where are the others? So I wasn't surprised when around that time while we were in court, eventually I saw the story that it had been announced that they had rescinded it because it was obvious that someone had to give it. And I actually suspected that maybe there were disagreements internally.
Yes.
Within their ranks.
I think so. I think there was pressure both internally and from the constituency.
Yeah.
And also among the party to say, look, we are hurting ourselves.
Yeah.
We are actually expending the goodwill that we got from Asinno. We are expending it on this. You want to change strategy. I think somebody went through
and there's this thing that has been on my mind. I mean, I don't know what you make of it. How the NDC has used its strength in Parliament over the period. I think it's been very problematic. I mean, one, we've had the NDC minority indicate they are not going to approve ministers of the government.
And they do.
And I mean, the main target in that instance was the fisheries minister, Howard Kumsin.
And then she got more votes.
She got the most votes. I mean, quite recently, the NDC party at the national level publicly said they had directed the MPs not to approve
our democracy.
Operation Save Our Democracy, which was declared even before when Alan Chemantin announced and Ifria Koto, and even before the president who made a substantive appointment, Operation Save Our Democracy was announced. The substantive appointments were made, and the NDC directed its MPs not to approve those individuals. The minority said we're not going to approve them. They went and
their
members voted for their approval. I mean, it begs the question on how strategic have they used the 137, and especially for an election that, as of now, all credible polls, as we speak today, say that the NDC is winning 2024. We heard from the EIU, we heard from Fitch, among others. They all say the NDC is going to win. The question again comes: have they played the parliamentary game very well in order? Because, like Mark was telling yesterday on the show, if in January 2024 things are turned around and the economy starts looking much better, because mind you, lights are not going off, like he made a point. I mean, cost of living is high, but beyond that, there isn't a practical challenge that can really frustrate people directly to feel that they want to punish the government. So it means that when there is some obvious goodness around, it may change the wind a bit more, and that may be a bit dangerous.
And that was my next point, which is that, again, the minority has lost significant face in another fight they picked, right? And often they pick the fight.
Yes.
And then they assure us.
Precisely your democracy. No one asked you.
Yeah, they pick the fight. They pick the fight. So their own fight, they pick the fight, and then they lose the fight. They lose the fight on their own terms. And then in all the cases, it is not as if the majority side introduced a superior strategy that defeated them.
In fact, they barely do nothing in those instances. They don't do anything.
They just play along. They target a few of them possibly, because especially in those votes, they are, target a few of them because what you need exactly, and then you get it. But they then play along until they crash their own vehicle. That had fueled the change in the leadership, right?
Yeah.
And the thinking behind that change, when it happened in the minority, was to fix this. Was to fix this particular problem we're just talking about. This is my good friend Ato Forson's, I guess, first major fight that he's picked, that he's led them to pick.
I mean, if you count the approval of the 3 ministers,
well,
he should be the
okay, so this is the second.
That was their first major. So this is
which they lost. So, and again, this one too, they have lost it. He will say, though, he will argue, as they argued yesterday, that there's another strategy they're rolling out. And that strategy we are seeing is playing out now on the floor, right?
Yeah.
So definitely actually confirmed it. When he did a press conference, when the leader did a press conference yesterday, he didn't want to go into details. But definitely says, confirmed it. And actually, so is this a new strategy? He says yes, which is that they will go to parliament still, but they will put a few of them on the floor because of the question of quorum. And then when House is in session, they will raise quorum, the issue of quorum, the constitutional provision of 102, and say, well, there's no quorum for us to even do business at all. This is, you can't even decide anything. You can't even hold any parliamentary conversation in this house. And then the speaker, having counted, will be forced to adjourn. They did it yesterday. They've done it today. They've done it today. And again, all done by Roxanne Afiamepo, right? So this is the strategy going forward. So then, and again, what they're trying to do now, okay, so I'm now beginning to, what they're trying to do now is to now switch the discomfort that they had in pitching themselves against their constituents, against the people, and put that burden on the majority. Because you, the majority, you still have enough people by yourselves to form a quorum in a day, to take decisions, right? if we are able to raise quorum, then it is you who have failed to represent your people. So the argument will be, but we were in the house. In fact, we raised the quorum. Okay? They didn't bring all their, at least 93 people to form a quorum. So that then they're trying to deliberately shift the public pressure.
It's a tall order. It's a tall order. But it's a tall order because...
But if they do it consistently enough...
It's a tall order because the question that one asks is, so today, the quorum issue has been raised, the House has been adjourned. So it means that the NDC MPs were also not in the House.
Yeah.
Because if all 137 of them were in the House, it would have meant that the House would have had a quorum.
Yeah.
So it means that their members are also staying away from the House.
No, not necessarily. I mean, the quorum is just 93.
Yeah, but the 93, that's the point I'm making. So
but
the 93, if the NDC 137 are in the House, the House will have a quorum.
No, but remember.
Yeah, so if you are not giving the House the 93, and the MPP members are also not coming, then the question again comes again, that the people's questions that have been asked by the NDC MPs, which is also important, what happens in those instances, or do I allow a quorum to be formed in those instances?
So if a question, I presume, as the strategy rules are, we'll see
how it will play out, yeah.
You need to raise the question of quorum on the floor for the speaker to adjourn.
Yes.
If you keep silent, business will go on.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the day you have questions, you keep quiet. Yeah. You ask your question.
Let it go.
You go. The business is done. On the day you have no question for your people, you raise quorum. House shuts down. Business is not done. True or false? Okay. Yeah. I think that should be the strategy. That should be. It's different from what will actually be.
I mean,
we've done 2 days of this.
What I am certain of is the fact that, look, Evans, when there is serious government business, trust me, if the IMF says that there is some law,
they'll whip the people in line.
Yes.
They'll whip, the majority side will whip their people.
So that again comes back to the question again. In the event the majority side gets the 137 into the House,
they'll do business.
So what will happen?
No, but here's the challenge though. And in the last 2-3 days, I find myself consistently asking the question of the majority. But where are your numbers? Why are you complaining about them when you can also do business? Because they've accused the minority guys of being unpatriotic, right? But then the question is, what about you? You have the numbers to form quorum and do business. In fact, you have 138. You can do business. You can take decisions.
In fact, we are getting some answers now. We've seen some of them on the campaign trail.
They're on a campaign trail.
Yeah.
So the media focus. As for the minority, they declare their intention. They said, oh, that's what they'll do. Okay. You say you want to do government business. Fantastic. So you have the incentive to do government business. They don't. It's not their interest.
Yeah.
So you bring your people and do it without them. And yet you have failed to bring your people. You have more questions to answer. I believe, I don't know whether that's the thinking behind the strategy, but the more they raise quorum, of course, they also have a certain responsibility. That's what you're raising.
Yes.
But the questions will start going more to the majority side. Because
I can't imagine what the story will be tomorrow if they are supposed to perhaps finalize the talks on the anti-gay bill, for instance. And there's no quorum.
A gay bill that had been championed by six minority members with 1 majority member. So it is largely an opposition bill, right? So again, but again, the strategy goes, you vary it to suit you, right? So on days if that is raised, they'll whip their people in line to come and do their business. Fine. The day they don't have, and I guess same applies for the majority. On the day, for example, and I'm thinking, what is it that the minority will do on when the finance minister comes to read the media budget? I believe everybody will also come. I believe the majority side will come. But will the minority side stay out? How would they play that? And how would the public view the action? That would be a very tricky one.
I think that would be the real test of
the effectiveness
of the strategy, especially because personally, I do not think the MPP will be able to get 137 plus 1 on the floor on that particular day.
That's true.
I mean, at least we know that one member of parliament has not been well for a while.
Yeah.
We also know that another member of parliament has actually been very inconsistent in terms of her attendance of parliamentary proceedings. And so that obviously puts them at best, maybe 135, 136, depending on how they're able to bring the one who is unwell over to the House. So that raises a very important question. And for now, like you said, it's just the early days of this particular strategy. So we do not know what the approach will be
on certain days.
Budget review, because that is a very important business.
But increasingly, to put the MPP side under pressure, especially now that we are beginning to learn that the reason why a lot of them aren't in the House is because they are either with Alan or they are at Bawumia, mostly, because there are one or two people also spread across the other aspirants, right? That is now beginning to surface. As that comes in, pressure will come from ordinary folks, the people, on that question. Okay, so, and it comes back to who wins at the end of this. Who stands to lose more and who wins at the end of this? That's a difficult question to answer. There's a reason why the minority side backtrack. I think they realize that if you keep doing this, you stand to lose. You stand to lose the middle class. The floating voter might be unhappy with you. They may have been happy with you after Sinoff and maybe be shifting towards you. But this is one of those areas that they can't. I
mean, every analyst you spoke to said they should go to parliament.
Exactly. And those are the middle class floating voters, educated. You know, they have a bit of money. They know they can analyze. They didn't like it, even when they had said that James Quayson's trial should be stopped. They disagreed with staying out of parliament altogether. So they've backtracked. Okay. Does that save the NDC in terms of who loses more out of this back and forth? I think that's a question that both sides need to analyze. But where I stand now, where it stands in parliament, if this strategy goes on and the minority side manages to do the business they want to do, you know what I mean? That's in the business that they want to do.
Have
the interest in
want to champion. Yeah.
Good. And when the majority sides have the attempt to do theirs, they raise quorum and shut down the House. I think if that's how it plays out, obviously the MPP side will be in trouble.
Yes.
I think they will.
Until they let it hit them such that they can feel it. That's the only time that the government will be open
and you know why I believe in the long term the MPP MPs will lose more. The MPP as a part will lose more because again the primary reason we are learning now that the MPP side members aren't able to go to the House because of campaigning that's happening, right?
Yeah.
This campaigning is going to go on until November, at least for the presidential.
Yes.
What it means is that between now and November, these MPP MPs will be required either by the injunctions of the Bawumia camp and the Alan camp and others to be with them.
Yes.
Right? So if Bawumia is in your constituency and you are in this camp, you can't be in parliament.
Yes.
I mean, that's a given.
The only time you can be in parliament if you're not in the camp.
Right? So you could say that every time there's at least one MP from their side who is on the trail.
Yeah.
Or at least sometimes even two, because Alan too will be pulling his own people.
And then there are days that you do multiple constituencies.
So everybody has to go. So I find it absolutely difficult to see a situation where the MPP wins here.
Yeah.
That is why I think at some point they will have to talk.
But while we are discussing who is winning, there's one person that is losing. That's the people.
Oh, bottom line. But you see,
they are the only constant losers in all of this.
I agree. But ultimately, as far as the parties are concerned, whether you lose or win out in the end will be determined by how the people sanction what they believe to be your misdeeds in the House.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's true that people will be ultimately losing, but will they punish?
Yes.
In the long run, would they remember what has happened in the long run? Look, with all this controversy that's happening with the economy, MPP doesn't need this.
Yeah.
And that is why I think at some point they need to go to the NDC and do what the NDC is asking.
I think that in terms of terminating the prosecution of James Quayson, I think that would take a lot of convincing to do. But I still think the MPP need to dialogue with the NDC. At least I know for a fact if motions are moved in court, if the AG, for instance, takes the view that this is a member of parliament and he thinks the court should give some concession, I think the court perhaps may be open to exercising. I mean, the AG telling the court that if there's a motion that vary your court hearing on a daily basis and the court says that the AG supports that particular motion, I mean, that could in itself, assuming even the court does not even agree, even if the court does not even agree with him, at least it shows some commitment that we are not necessarily.
I honestly think that the government had boxed themselves into a corner on this matter. because now that there's a door of no return that they've now gone through.
Yes.
The Supreme Court has said it.
Yeah.
I think the appeals court. Right? Appeals court has said it. High Court has said it and reaffirmed it. I think that door is shut.
Yeah.
They've gone to the Supreme Court, have they not?
They've now taken it to the Supreme
Court. So the Supreme Court will rule and then we'll see.
Yeah.
But if the Supreme Court rules and they also reaffirms the appeals court, that thing is shut. So it means that every day you have to go. At what point do you eat humble pie and go and say, either Nolly prosecute or, okay, we've changed our position on the matter.
The Nolly prosecute will be a big pie. A big pie.
I mean, for me, it's and again, the more they do, the more they prosecute the interpretation, the more they also offend the middle class and the floating voter, who most of them have said, why? Those I've heard on social media and speak about this generally have agreed that.
I think this whole thing is a bit untidy and it's a lot of pressure and stress for the entire country. I mean, I keep hearing very ordinary people ask me that, what's this change education issue about?
Exactly.
It's problematic, yeah.
Anyway, so but very interesting days ahead. Look, we are going to follow the strategy of the NPP and the NDC very closely and see who blinks first. I think yesterday, the NDC side blinked first. But the fact that you blink first doesn't mean that, you'd...
Yeah, they are shifting gears.
Yeah, they're shifting gears. Let's see the effectiveness of this strategy as well.
And scuttle business.
Enjoy the rest of your day.